Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, All Nation Renovation, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Chelsea Lighting, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Investors Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the Witkoff Group, Urban American, Ackman Ziff Real Estate, Eastern Consolidated, Goldman Properties, the Moynihan Group, Muss Development, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Triangle Equities.
I don't have my crystal apple, but where are we going to be in 2012? Are we in a recession? Is the business world getting better? Is the real estate market doing well? I really don't have the answer. So I've assembled 4 of the most prominent real estate and business leaders to provide their insight on where they project 2012. My guests, they include Joseph Ficalora, who is the president and CEO of a small little bank corp, the New York Community Bank Corp, 41.2 billion, maybe 42 billion.
42.
Okay. Lee Nybard, who is the Global Chief Executive Officer of Aria Property Partners. Richard Baker, who is the CEO of Hudson Bay Companies. And last but not least, Jim Kuhn, who is the president of Newmark Knight Frank. So, banker, let's really look at it this way. You and I, people look at me as Dr. Doom and Gloom, and I put to my right my good friend, Dr. Banker. Are we in a recession again?
I don't think we're going to technically be in a recession, but I think we're in a period where there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty, a tremendous amount of risk that is driven by world events as well as local events. So the consequence of change in front of us is that we're much more vulnerable to adversity than we are to a positive regeneration of an expanding economy. So I'm going to guess that 12 has the potential of being more difficult than 11 in many ways.
In what ways do you feel that way?
I think the number of events that may occur that will cause market adjustment, and I'm not talking about real estate markets. I mean, New York is doing very well, and New York is much more stable than the equity markets or than currencies. But ultimately, the big discussion affecting people is going to be their psychology, whether or not they're comfortable with the events that are occurring in front of them.
It's interesting because, you talk about psychology, and Richard, Hudson Bay Companies owns Lord & Taylor, and they own the Hudson stores out in Canada and Zellers. How do you see the retail environment today? How do you see the consumer? Okay. Are they worried? Or or are they apprehensive? Where do you see that market?
What we're seeing here in the United States with Lord & Taylor is it's really a tale of two cities. So the better retailers I think of it as there's the Saks customer and the Payless shoe customer. The Saks customer has only 3% unemployment and has plenty of disposable income and wants to shop and spend money. The Payless customer has 20, 30% unemployment and has a much tighter budget. So unfortunately, when they report the statistics, they put it all together. But if you break it up into two pieces, what you'll see then is luxury hotels, luxury apartments, luxury traveling, luxury retail doing better than last year and materially better than the lower end areas to shop. That's what we're seeing.
But aren't we seeing, and you know, you even have done this, you've created a discount division of Lord & Taylor. You've created a home division of Lord & Taylor. You're going to a certain customer base. Who are you looking after? And the TJ Maxxes of the world are doing really well.
We're all going after the same better customer. So our Lord & Taylor customer is a better customer who's a little smarter and wants a deal. She used to buy all of her clothes at Saks, or she bought all of her things at Macy's. Now she says, you know what, I don't need to buy everything at Saks. I can buy the very best dress and the very best top at Saks, but then I'm going to buy my sportswear and my basics and my daughter's clothes at Lord & Taylor. And same thing with the home. We've designed a home concept that is a similar format to Bed Bath & Beyond, but it's a slightly better taste level and it's a slightly better selection, a better presentation, so that that better customer feels like they're getting a deal, but in a better environment. Same thing with the outlets, Lord & Taylor outlets. We're offering our better traditional customer some product from last year at a much better deal, and she wants a good deal. So you have to break it up into two very different markets. It's not the lower end customer shopping up to a Lord & Taylor outlet.
So it's not the Payless customer. It's that middle market customer who wants a bargain, or someone who's looking for...
Lee Nybart's wife, who can shop anywhere, still wants a deal. So she'll go to the outlet store or she'll go to the home store because she wants a deal, even though she can shop at Neiman Marcus.
The kid who grew up in Stuyvesant Town, how do you see the market today?
Well, first let's define the market and the universe. So 50% of the sales of office in this country in the first half of 11 were done in 4 markets: New York, Washington, San Francisco, and West LA. Those are the supply-constrained 24-hour markets. You can throw Boston in if you want, but it's small enough that it doesn't make a statistical impact. Then you look at the Fortune 500 companies, and 50% of those are in 4 states: New York, Texas, California, and Illinois. So if you want to define the office market by the supply-constrained markets, it's excellent. If you want to define it by the rest of the country, it's probably not that good. And that's always been traditionally what happens on up and down markets. The big question is, can the United States decouple its economy from the problems, sovereign issues in Europe? Will the ECB step in, et cetera? Or from China, who probably can't sustain 8 to 9% GDP growth over the next 10 years? And then can New York sustain itself and decouple itself from the rest of the country and the problems in the job markets, et cetera?
So here we have a guy, Mr. Nyabart, who has investors from around the world who are looking at different places, and 2011 has been a year that you've been like, has the country gone on sale? Or have you bought so much of your appetite because you've increased, you've bought industrial, you've bought office, and you bought an insatiable amount of residential and also hospitality. So how do you, your investors are giving you money, what are you investing in?
Well, let's just back up and address the investor, because I think that's a fascinating story. I travel all around the world and meeting with investors, and it goes in cycles. 4 years ago, they thought the U.S. was overpriced, so they were investing in funds that we had in Europe and India. And if we had had funds in Brazil, we would have gotten money for that. That's completely changed. My last trip last week over to Europe and the Gulf, I've sensed that they now feel that the best place to invest is the United States, that they have to invest monies. They're nervous, which they should be, about Europe. They hear the story of they hear the stories of bubbles in China. Japan hasn't accomplished much in the last 20 years. So now the capital is really coming to the U.S. In nice numbers. As far as our strategy, we continue to believe that as spread investors and value add creators, that the multifamily and industrial space is a spectacular arena for us. Can you imagine buying fully leased industrial buildings that are throwing off 7, 7.5%, 8% free and clear yields and being able to borrow from nice people like this at 4%? Now that's a spectacular business. Now it's not New York City office buildings at Park Avenue and 50th Street, but in terms of return on equity, if you can get double digits, our investors are very happy.
Now what's interesting is, Jim is talking that in the 4 markets, there have been a lot of purchases. But, right now, certain people believe that the prices have reached too high in certain of these markets. I mean, the most recent purchase of the 49% interest in 299 Park at $1,075, it doesn't make the same type of return. The office leasing market is not that great in New York City. Mr. Nybart left it many years ago, which was a very smart move when they sold 1290 Avenue of the Americas. Mr. Ficalora has made some loans over here, but he's made loans at a low price of $200 to $300 a square foot as compared to $1,000 a square foot.
But Michael, I think what this really comes down to is if you can honestly look at your cost of capital and decide what you really need to earn, New York office becomes a product that may today at these prices not have the upside that people are talking about, but it probably has less of a downside. So I think of New York City office today as the blue chip stocks of 30 years ago, where if you stick to 50 to 6% leverage, I think the New York market over the long haul will still get better, and I don't think you're going to earn 20% IRRs, but I think that you'll earn returns that are commensurate with the lack of downside risk of owning a New York City office building.
But I think the loans that you put on the books in 2011, you've gone into certain markets over here, Avenue of the Americas, the Far West Side Meatpacking District. These are markets where people want to be. I don't think investments in Lower Manhattan in office markets where you're going to have so much space being built has the same value. I think it's community centric. I mean, you've made a decision. You're a major multifamily lender, but you made a decision to make loans on quality commercial real estate. Why?
Well, I think we've heard it today. There is money that needs to be placed. And I believe that equity markets are at grave risk. The uncertainties I was talking about earlier have a significantly more, the effect on equities can be nearly spontaneous. And the ability to lose money in equities is overnight. Real estate is very, very different. And New York real estate is particularly stable and looking very well. So the idea that New York is going to attract money from the world is very, very real. And the idea that real estate is a safer asset investment than some of the alternative asset investments makes it more likely that people will invest here.
But I think, let's not be Manhattan-centric. Let's also, you operate in New Jersey, you operate in Long Island, and the market in the state of New Jersey is not the same market as it is in New York City.
We do very, very little today in New Jersey, in Long Island. We do mostly in New York City, mostly in Manhattan, but we're in Queens, we're in Brooklyn. Yeah. There's a lot of good real estate. Multifamily real estate throughout the New York area is very stable in that it's old, it's well below the market typically, and some of the things that we do is older buildings typically. So that real estate holds its value through cycles, and cycles are inevitable.
Now you've acquired a lot of multifamily, but this year you haven't really acquired multifamily in New York City or even New Jersey? Why have you changed to go to Texas or Florida or to other parts of the country on the multifamily market, as opposed to the Big
Few
Apple?
things. We certainly have over 11,000 units in New York City. We have more than enough work to do here. But our homework and our analysis shows that areas like Texas are exhibiting rental growth, which we are proving out on a monthly basis. Plus, you have a much more stable property tax prediction of what will happen, and your basis is far less than what it would be in the four cities that Jimmy talks about. So from a risk-adjusted basis, with proper 5 to 7 year floating rate financing with the proper swaps and caps in place, it's a spectacular business.
So here's a question which relates to, Joe's a public company, you're a private equity company,
Private company.
private company, but you are also, on one of your other hats, you're involved with a REIT, okay? And right now you're owned by a public company.
That's correct.
So how do people, when you went to the Middle East and Europe last week, and you say to them, we're investing in the U.S., they say, this city, Houston, Texas, or, how do they look at other cities? I think the greatest example is when I've done shows with foreign lenders, and I said to the head guy from Deca Bank, do you think if you went back to Germany and you showed them a property in Jersey City or Long Island City, would they buy? And he said, we're not going to finance that type of thing. I can't put that on the cover of the Deca financial statement. How do the investors from Europe and the Middle East look at the other part of the country as opposed to the four major markets that Jim was talking about?
These are top 10 cities, whether it's Houston, Atlanta, Dallas, Miami. These are cities with significant populations. Investors have bought into the Sun Belt strategy, that's where the population will be migrating to, and they're very comfortable about it. I think what they don't want to do is with the occasional trophy asset like 299 Park Avenue, they want to be in at the proper price per square foot and not have a situation where $1,075 a foot winds up being $700, which can happen, even though we all know that long term, New York City is still the best.
Look, I think that there is a political and a tax and environmental issue that's sort of hovering over the ability for other cities to be sustainable. North Dakota has a 3% unemployment rate because of the Balkan Shale. We have a situation upstate New York where the Marcellus Shales in Pennsylvania, they're adding jobs by the day, and we're being held up by environmental issues that may or may not be relevant, but they certainly have been overcome in most of the country. We just diverted a pipeline. It was going to come down from Canada, Keystone Pipeline. It's going to take another 18 months. That was going to create thousands of jobs. The energy business has made Houston a very viable city, but the problem in all these cities is you can't paint all sectors with the same brush, because multifamily and retail may thrive in a market that's adding jobs, but it doesn't mean that the office market's going to thrive, because when the vacancy gets down to 12%, 10 guys build. So that's why it's very hard to look at the United States today in a macro way.
I mean, I did a show 2 weeks ago on what's happening in New Jersey, and I had this young owner of property saying that he bought an office building in New Jersey for $35 a square foot.
Probably what it's worth.
Okay, the construction cost, you couldn't construct for $35 a foot. The leasehold improvements you couldn't construct for $35 a foot. I mean, that's just the Garden State. I mean, are we talking about specific pockets?
Suburban office space for 30 years. We have buildings that we built 25, 30 years ago. They're renting for exactly the same rent, if you can rent them today, as we did when they were brand new, and you got to redo the space and new TI. It's a very tough business to be in suburban office.
So what's the good business? If somebody is looking at 2012,
Retail is a great business. Retail,
but isn't retail caught into the consumers?
it's the right retail, whether it's New Jersey or Long Island or even Illinois. If you have the right shopping center or the right mall with the right tenants and the right demographics, it can be a spectacular investment.
And what happens, we talk about retail, but we do remember that there were chains, like Circuit City who went out of business. And I was saying prior on a previous show that at one time there was, Borders. And at one time, there was Sam Goody, there were record stores, there were other things. Okay, fortunately, Mr. Ficalora didn't make loans on those type of things. But retail changes, and the internet, isn't that having an effect on certain retail?
You got to pick the right retail project in the right area. So if it's a shopping center that has a Target and a Whole Foods and 10,000 square feet of very small shops in between, that's spectacular. And it almost doesn't matter where it is. Is it in California, is it in Mississippi, or is it in New York?
Now, here's the interesting thing, especially since you're a retailer, so your mind is more involved with retail. I didn't hear Mr. Nybard or Mr. Kuhn really talk that much about retail, and I haven't heard you on retail.
Because they can't buy it for the type of value that you can to generate the returns they need. The nice REIT folks are aggressively buying those quality retail assets at such a low cap rate that makes it hard for certain investors.
But let's separate street retail from shopping centers. So the reason I haven't talked about retail is because I have some experts here. But you asked what's the best business for 2012. In my opinion, the best business is to go into the few cities that are vibrant 24-hour environments. We've talked about them. Let's take New York. And find the next great neighborhood. Because if you want to buy multifamily or retail, there are so many opportunities that arise every year from people who have vision. I mean, the meatpacking district wasn't around 10 years ago. And the great thing that's about to happen, and this is my other concern about New York, which is who the next mayor is going to be, but Bloomberg's concept of bringing a world-class university like Stanford or Cornell to New York for an engineering school so that the graduates come here, stay here, and start new technology, new media companies is a brilliant strategy that he should get more credit for. New York has surpassed Boston now for technology companies behind Silicon Valley. And I think that the next great business is finding the next great neighborhood.
What's the best next great neighborhood? You've been lending money here for years. I mean, how do you as a banker make the decision that you want to go to the far west side? I mean, when you finance the Starrett Lehigh building, and as Jim alluded just before, I think Paul Pariser on my show a number of years ago said when he took the New York State Commons to show them 111 8th Avenue, they said, "Are you crazy? The neighborhood was a different market."
Change is good.
So how do you, as a banker, and I know one thing about NYCB, that board finds out about any loan over $4 million. How do you make a decision? What is the right neighborhood to make that decision? Is it a combination of the neighborhood and the borrower, the quality of the borrower? Is it, where is that?
Well, it also helps when the borrower has a tremendous amount of money on the table. So in that particular case, there was a huge amount of money, and that came from overseas. And
Right.
Obviously, it's a very low LTV, so that helps tremendously. But your point is very valid. Changing is, in fact, both good and bad. You have to be aware of the neighborhoods that are going to deteriorate as well as the neighborhoods that are going to improve. And certainly, momentum takes it all the way.
I'd be better off asking my 3 kids who are between 20 and 26 where I should go next than I am anybody in my office.
Yeah.
And I mean that
Yeah.
quite seriously.
Yeah, that's probably right.
If you don't surround yourself today with young, bright people, you're not going to succeed in today's world.
Yeah, good point.
But you have to look at the realities of the cities versus the suburbs. And with our big holdings in Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Upper Manhattan, you start looking at the median income applications of people who are renting our space or are renting our apartments. And it's increasing all the time. And those of us who live in the suburbs see the amount of time that it takes us to get to work, the property taxes that we're paying, and it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to realize that these neighborhoods will have to expand. The ones that are on the subway lines, the ones that can get both spouses to work. So I think that the future of these cities, and it's not only New York City, we've seen it in Washington, D.C., where we've built office buildings. You can see the spreading out of these neighborhoods at the expense of the suburbs.
One thing I haven't heard, and this came up on a show that I recently did, I don't hear the terminology for sale homes, for sale housing. I hear rental, I hear retail. I don't hear about the acquisition of building new homes and for sale. Joe, I mean, have you done much financing in this, or is it?
Well, we do not lend on 1 to 4 family for portfolio. We haven't done that for many, many years. But we're probably the 13th largest lender on 1 to 4 family nationally. And we do that all for Fannie.
But I'm
Freddie,
talking about new construction, Joe.
new construction is light. In fact, most of the refinancing is people that have enough money in the bank so that they can pay down their loan, because many properties are below their outstanding loan. So the people that are refinancing 2 and 3 times in this cycle are the people who have enough money to do that. We are losing tremendous value in real estate because the government programs actually incent devaluation of real estate. You know, when you talk about default as being a target, when the government passes law to break the law between a mortgagee and a mortgagor, or a servicer and an asset owner, the government is sending the wrong message. So there are large numbers of people that are looking at how do they get their bailout, their government program, so as to stay in their house, not pay their loan, stay in their house and pay less on their loan. So they're being enticed to take a government program that's going to help renting,
Right.
because there's an awful lot of homes that are
So what
that are
we're going
vacant.
to do, since this is part 1 of part 2, we're going to continue this discussion next week. So I'd like to thank Joe Ficalora, Lee Nybart, Richard Baker, and Jim Kuhn, and we'll see you next week when we come back for part 2 of the show.